Hi everyone, welcome to USP College. My name's Mark Shedd and I run the A-Level Photography programme. Please, at your own leisure, view this slideshow, taking in the not just the images, but also the captions. I've helped by talking through this selection of images and welcoming you onto the course. Okay, so here you can see some previous student sketchbooks and the various ways in which we can display our work. We use sketchbooks, usually A3, so that we can monitor and indeed grade your work. Of course, you have to be able to prove what you're doing, not other than just photographs you've taken in your camera, but very often we need to print them out, show our processes and techniques, our thoughts and ideas behind our work, and we use sketchbooks in order to collate those images, ideas, and indeed research. Now, digital photography has been born out of traditional film and chemical photography. Now, so much effects that we see in modern day lens-based material is based on the old school methods. Now, of course, a digital platform can offer a whole range of different techniques and effects that we couldn't get before. However, there is some physical factors to do with photography, or indeed light, that are exactly the same. For example, shutter speed, aperture and depth of field. The A-Level course spreads over 2 years, and apart from lots of technical, practical, we also have an extent of the research and contextual studies. Throughout the course, we'll be looking at the starts, the beginning of photography, how light works physically, how those images are captured via a multitude of different lenses and then relayed onto different print, paper, or indeed how we may see something via our monitors. With many of these contextual images that we research, we may be able to combine those with our own photographs and with our own ideas and concepts. So on this slide here, we can very clearly see the influence of Martin Parr, Andy Warhol, and a Renaissance painter called Hieronymus Bosch. And here we can see a direct influence on how these have influenced the photography and multi-layering that we can achieve with a digital platform such as Photoshop. Throughout the course, we'll be using both the studio, the photographic studio, that has a multitude of different lights and techniques that we can produce internally with both flash and floodlights. We could also be using the black and white darkroom, where we can produce actual photographs using negatives, or even a process called cyanotypes, which is the blue picture with the fern leaf on that there. So we will be combining both traditional processes and techniques along with new electronic and studio processing. So with these 3 pictures here, all of which are taken in a studio, one is by the famous photographer Man Ray, who employs a process called solarization, where you get both negative and a positive image almost at the same time. That's the bottom one on the left here. The one above that, obviously you can see a traditional portrait of 2 people, but it has much digital overlaying or compositing to give it its final effect. The square one on the right is a slow shutter picture that gives some very dramatic end results. Very often, photography, or the end result, the picture or the print, does involve a journey or taking a picture through a certain process. For example, we take photographs on our cameras, but we might make images via what we do with those pictures once we've printed them. So, for example, we could be over painting, masking, layering different pictures together, gluing them, ripping them apart. So an image has a journey other than just capturing it via your camera and the lens. As previously mentioned, I said we'll be looking at the history and the contextual studies of photography. We'll also be looking at the political way in which photography has been used, both from propaganda to magazine covers, and looking at generally the effect that photography can have when used effectively by media. Now, we've all taken 1,000,001 selfies, but the self-portrait or the portrait can be used in many, many different ways. One of the strands we use on the A-level is the theme of identity. Here you can clearly see how the identity has been messed around by using symmetry at the same time. So, for example, using two left side of the face or two right side of the faces, or combining identities to get an overall image. This is one exciting way in which we can literally cut and paste imagery as opposed to just words. Compositing means bringing more than one thing together, in this case imagery. Montage also means doing the same thing but with some creative edge, that we're creating something new out of the multitude of images used. So here are three very, very different examples of how we might bring more than one image together to create a completely new, different image than what we started off with. We could just have a collection of the same style or type of photograph, and therefore that lends itself to a different way in which we display or indeed view the final outcome. About half of the world's photographs are taken inside and about half outside. Now, I don't need to tell you, of course, the intensity of light outside with the sun is thousands, if not millions of times more brighter than maybe a candle on the inside. So apart from how we could capture a photograph by a specific exposure, changing our settings on our camera to create an image, we might also want to think about how we present that image, because an image an image is taken is not necessarily how that image is viewed. Look at these examples. The presentation of a photograph or a series of photographs can often be quite stark or make us view something in a challenging or different way. These examples here range from obvious effect to stark contrast, and also into placing what's essentially two-dimensional, a photograph, into a three-dimensional environment. So we could use photographs not just as a flat image, but also perhaps as an installation. Once we have practiced using our camera and all the knobs and dials and get used to being fluid and confident with the apparatus, we soon start to realise that it's not the camera that makes us better photographers, but practice of that. Similarly, our other tool of the trade is Photoshop, the way in which we manipulate, play around with digital imagery. Very often, once we learn both of our tools of the trade, camera and Photoshop, it's then perhaps the subtle ways in which this could be employed, rather than playing around with more expansive, complex final images. So here's a good example of how we can subtly create something that has a strong visual effect. Our eyes naturally love and enjoy looking at repetition and reflection. Apart from an actual object being repeated, we love the idea of a mirror reflection. We love the idea of something being repeated in scale. This is just the way our eyes and brains work, but there's some examples here of how we could repeat and reflect, and of course this is endless in its variations. Once again, there's some examples here of montage, and just as the caption said, this can be very varied. We could use digital, we can use geometrics, but we can also use the chaos of a rip and a tear. Then how we take it through a secondary process or journey, which means how we display that. And of course, this is absolutely endless, but two examples here that have complete different beginnings let alone the final outcome. Okay then, so apart from just the student photographs that we take within the college, within the studio, at home, on your different assignments, apart from the reflection of your sketchbooks, the research, looking at the contextual and historical values of photography, we would also be looking at more traditional black and white natural form photography, and this will all eventually all come together to give you a variety in your sketchbook and have a wide scope in the different processes and techniques that you can employ to your creative photography, your ideas, to come up with some incredible outcomes and work that you can then print, display in various shows throughout the year, and indeed eventually wrap that up in the A-level with leaving with a both digital and physical portfolio which you can then take on to university or employment. This ends the slideshow, so thank you very much for listening. Please read through, analyse the photographs, and hopefully this will inspire you to get out there, start creating, start taking photographs, and even start making photographs once you've taken them through several processes, several journeys. Thank you very much.